Everyone, welcome to today's game. So we've been chatting around in some of our recent scenarios we've been playing. I was looking for something where we could use a reasonably cavalry heavy scenario and potentially have some ebb and flow with our cavalry fighting rather than just the very short resolutions we've seen in some of our smaller cavalry games. So I found this scenario up on the web. It's a derivation of a Charles Grant scenario from one of the scenario books he produced back in the 70s. We have the French force here, 2 regiments of line infantry and a regiment of light infantry. The light are down here closest to us. A line regiment with an artillery battery in the centre and a further line regiment garrisoning that small village on the left. And again an artillery battery with the lights here on the right. So they're holding this line. They're supported by some heavy cavalry. So we have a brigade of cuirassiers and a brigade of dragoons, and we have a brigade of guard, light cavalry also available as reserves. And they're going to be protecting the flank of a French position. That's the intended scenario, and they're being assaulted by a combined Prussian and Russian assault. So let's have a look at the Prussians first. We have a regiment of Landwehr here, they'll count as reservists, a regiment of line infantry in the woods here, and we have an artillery battery attached to the Landwehr, and that we assume that the small couple of trees here don't block line of sight, but these woods in the centre in this little patch here do. We have the limbers there for the artillery battery. Then we have the Russians. So we have a large brigade of 6 line battalions, or 2 regiments of 3. Well, I'll work out the brigades in a minute. And we've got some Russian dragoons. We also have on an immediate reserve for the Prussians, unable to come on automatically, 4 more regiments of Prussian cavalry. So we've got 6 regiments of cavalry on each side, so that should be quite a cavalry heavy game. At the moment for the French, we have 8 battalions on the table and 12 battalions for the Prussians and Russians. So I hope you enjoyed today's game. Hope it's a bit different. We've also done a slightly different table setup, so you may be able to clock this table is wider than normal, so it's about 7 foot wide, 6.5 perhaps foot wide here today. So I've gone deep rather than wide with my boards. So I can't stand behind it today, so you'll be getting angled shots as it goes right up, as you can see, against the window frame, so I can play it from both sides and one end only. So I hope you enjoyed today's game. Charlie might come down and join in a bit later, but he's currently doing some homework, so I'm going to let him get on with that. All right, guys, we'll crack on with the first turn and roll for initiative. So quite a lot of movement for the Prussians in this turn. So the Landwehr infantry has moved out to commence its infantry assault against the ridgeline. The gun battery has been pushed forward to try and give it clear field of fire rather than having to fire through the light cover of this scattered set of trees here. In the woods to the battery's left, the regular Prussians have moved forward through the woods, and we've got the first of the Prussian cavalry. A unit of Uhlans has moved on, a horse artillery battery has moved forward, as well as our command stand, and our Landwehr cavalry have moved onto the table. So a Lancer brigade has moved forward for the Prussians. For the Russian troops, they've stayed still, so they're going to let loose with artillery or infantry assault, and the Russian dragoons have moved forward on the far flank. For the French, with most things being hesitant in the front line, they weren't able to redeploy. We have pushed the light infantry forward onto the ridgeline, and they'll open fire with the artillery battery here, and our dragoons have moved into column to give themselves a bit more flexibility to move forward next turn. Unfortunately, the cuirassiers were hesitant. All right, that's it for movement. There'll be a little bit of firing. I'll come back and show you the artillery shoots. We'll start with the Russian artillery over here. It's all firing at long range, counter battery fire, so this will be at -2. Red dice are the artillery shoot, so that is 2. So that will be a fatigue casualty for the first battery, but 2 casualties from the artillery dice. And then second battery, again, suffers a fatigue casualty at -2 and no casualties from the artillery dice. So not great shooting from the Russians, but a couple of casualties on that French battery in the centre. French battery with artillery assault down here is going to open fire at these Landwehr just coming through the woods. That looks like it's more than 12 inches. I will check after we shot, but we'll take this as effective range. French do a bit better. We'll roll that one. That's definitely cocked. They roll a 7. That effective range is 1 casualty plus 2 more casualties from the artillery dice, but no discipline test. So the Landwehr can keep coming. That's it for turn 1. Let's move on and roll for ADCs and initiative for turn 2. So for the Russians, they've again got artillery assault on their artillery battery. We put that on. We lost initiative for our brigade in the centre here. Everything else is active. For the French, unfortunately, both the cavalry brigades went hesitant. So this will be a -1 adjustment to the French, but the French regain or acquire initiative on this second turn. Right, so we've got a bit of charging action. Charlie's arrived. He's assured me his homework is, what was it, Charlie? Very little.
Yeah, I've got 1 piece.
1 piece, so he's doing that later. And down here, the French charged forward to drive off the Prussian skirmishers who were threatening their guns, but then they were in turn countercharged by the Landwehr, who also drove off this French skirmisher screen. French skirmishers have fallen back behind their battalion. Prussians have fallen back into the woods. They did lose a base as a result of failing their discipline test when charged. All right, so we've got some charge results here. I don't think there'll be any defensive fire because both sides charged in this turn. So I think we'll probably move straight into charge combat. So let's work out the modifiers and do the first charge results. So both of us are regulars. Charlie is reservist, but he's not taken 4 casualties. There was no defensive fire to increase his casualty level. Both of us have attached our brigade commander. So we've both got a straight roll with a re-roll. I roll a magnificent 4. Charlie rolls a magnificent 5. I'm going to re-roll my 1, Charlie.
I'm going to re-roll my 2.
And I've got a 4 still. And Charlie's got a 9.
Ooh.
So you've won by 5, Charlie. That's pretty good. You're going to drive me back, I think, on a 5. 3 to 5. You take the ground and I retreat with D3 casualties. So I take 2 casualties and I will retreat. So movement completed for turn 2. So we've got the Prussian Landwehr who've just charged up onto the ridge. Charlie's bringing up his lancers in support, although the larger regiment is blocked by the hesitant brigade in the woods down here. The French have responded by moving some reinforcements up towards the ridgeline, but these units are unformed below the ridge down here. The Prussians continue to push their skirmish screen forward, but otherwise are waiting for their counter battery fire to take effect before launching the Russian infantry into the assault. For the French, we did have an artillery battery here, but concerned it was going to get overrun by cavalry and charged in the flank by infantry, we've done an emergency limber and pulled it back so we can continue to employ it to try and support a counterattack towards the ridge. All right, that's it for movement. We'll now move on to opening fire with the Russian guns, counter battery against the French. What have you rolled, Charlie?
I got a 5 minus 2. That'll be for T casualty.
Yeah.
But I do 1 casualty with the.
Okay, so they're up to 3.
And the next
and
one.
And then the other battery.
Nothing.
You got a fatigue casualty?
Yeah, just a fatigue.
Okay, so long range artillery batteries doing counter battery fire are still really struggling. So we haven't yet knocked the ability of this French gun battery off artillery assault. All right, that's it for the firing. The skirmishers didn't really do anything at all. On we'll go with turn 3. Let's roll for activation. Charlie got initiative, didn't you, Charlie, for the Russians and Prussians? Unfortunately, he got a hesitant on his artillery assault in the centre, and he still has infantry assault on his Landwehr. You didn't get any other hesitant units, did you, Charlie?
No.
No, and for the French, unfortunately, this brigade down here that was retreating has gone hesitant, so it is a very vulnerable target for Charlie to charge.
So
Charlie moves first, and he is indeed going to charge
so I
the
can
retreating
charge
infantry.
this one.
So the Landwehr have charged, and the Landwehr, because they were charging a retreating unit, automatically caused them to rout. So they've fled back. Here they are allowed to stop behind cavalry units. So we were lucky they didn't just completely flee off the table, but that brigade took an extra 3 casualties, I think it was, from the rout move, and that brigade, this brigade here, will now be faltering. We've now got to do the charge test as the second unit of Landwehr charges into the French line here.
I
Now,
should win this.
Charlie should win this because he gets +2 for charging an unformed unit, and I'm flanked. So
+4.
by that charging, so it'll be +4 to Charlie. He hasn't got his commander in on this one. You should put your commander in on this one, Charlie. You didn't need him in on the other one
So
because it was an automatic win.
So
All right. So we roll a 4.
Oh,
You've
I've
got
won.
a 7.
+5. You're
So
victory.
you've won. You have, that's victory. You cause this other brigade to rout. It will take D6 casualties. It takes 6 casualties, and it will also fall. The Landwehr have broken through. Both the French battalions have been broken. The French cuirassiers will want to countercharge the Landwehr, but you declare charges for both players before you complete the charges. So the Landwehr declared their charges. At that point, the French cavalry couldn't charge because they had their infantry battalions in the way. So the cuirassiers couldn't declare a charge. Because their charges were blocked by their own infantry. I think that makes sense. So there's no opportunity this turn for the cuirassiers to countercharge. They will undoubtedly perhaps try that next turn. All right, so there's no more charges for the French. That's it. So normal movement, Charlie, and we'll do movement and come back and I'll show you where everything's got to. Movement for the French. We've moved our dragoons up from reserve at the back of that field forward to support this right-hand end of the line. And moving some of the French battalions up to the ridgeline now. We've done that part in response to the Russians now starting to move forward as they were hesitant. The Russian infantry has now started to move out across their gun line. The dragoons stay in support. A lot of movement down here though. So the Prussians are now released from the woods as they are able to advance. Remember, Charlie, they don't have infantry assault order on the blue flagged unit yet. The ones with infantry assault, the Landwehr, are well up the table, facing off against the cuirassiers with the routing Allied brigade. This gun battery, as Charlie reminded me, is also going to be subject to that falter test, but the falter only kicks in at the start, or the test only kicks in at the start of the next turn, so they have been able to move and unlimber, or rather unlimber this turn, so they will get a shot before that falter test kicks in. And Charlie is now also moving both his Prussian artillery batteries up to potentially get them onto the ridgeline, and Charlie's lancers are moving forward. All right, that's it for movement. Now on to French. Really aren't on form today, so you can see what we rolled. We rolled a double 1 for our artillery battery that had unlimbered this turn, so it was on 0 as a score, so it definitely goes low on ammo. It did get 2 casualties. It got 3 combat dice for firing at a column at effective range, and actually also closed columns when you look how close those 2 battalions are to one another. I don't know whether it would be closed columns or a bounce through actually, but anyway, we did it at a closed column, caused 2 casualties on the Landwehr, no discipline test, so that's it. Otherwise, none of the skirmishers did anything too much to either side, so that's the end of the turn. We'll move on to turn 4 next. Let's do ADCs and roll for the French. Both of our frontline infantry battalions, brigades, or indeed regiments, both of our frontline infantry regiments went hesitant. Our dragoons have also gone hesitant. We put a roll on to try and take our low of ammo marker off this artillery battery, but we failed that. Our cuirassiers are active, so they are the only active unit on the table. And now I've got my falter test to do on this light brigade that is at the edge of the table. We roll a 5. I think that's okay, isn't it, Charlie? I think they can obey orders, but they are pretty heavily damaged. All right, so I'm on a -3 for my initiative, Charlie. Do you want to go first? We roll an 11. You
8.
roll an 8.
I win it because you get -4.
I get my charge for the French this turn. Both cuirassier regiments have charged into these 2 units of Landwehr. All right, let's do the charge defensive volleys then. So first for this unit here. So you rolled a 7 actually,
Yeah,
Chargy.
I've
and
got
you've
both
rolled-
7s.
Both got 7.
I'm on for the second one.
That
I rolled
one's
one
at
first.
-1, isn't it? So that's a 6 and a 7 and half effect. So these are standard volleys. So a 6 does nothing, a 7 does 2 casualties, halved to 1. So that's 1 casualty on that battalion. All right, that'll have no effect on the charge results. Let's now work out those charge modifiers. So the French are at -1 on both of these charges. Charlie has a re-roll on the right-hand one. We'll start with the left-hand one, Charlie. So starting with this one. I get a 7.
I got a 6, so it's
Okay,
a
so
draw.
that's 7-7. That's a draw. I'm sure I will bounce off. Cavalry versus infantry. I retire, take a casualty. And if it's a draw, you take a casualty too. Okay, so we both take a casualty and I will retire. Okay, and then for the next charge, I get a 9.
A 7. What would the result be? Because I might re-roll it.
Okay, you're 7. You get a net +1, don't you? So you're on an 8, so I've won by 1. Cavalry versus infantry, I would melee. You melee unformed.
What's it? What if I get a 1? What will happen?
I don't think it'll change. So it's worth you re-rolling, really. So you got a 7, so it stays the same, doesn't it? So I melee. Yeah, and you melee unformed. All right, okay, we'll move those into combat. And firing is completed, so Russian dragoons have moved forward into this gap to potentially put pressure on this part of the line. The Russian infantry has now cleared their gun line and starting to move forward, and their guns next turn will be able to potentially open fire again over their heads at the ridge. Russian grenadiers have arrived from reserve on the far left flank, and the Prussian lancers are now approaching the ridgeline with artillery support. But the only good news for the French is the cuirassiers have charged home, as you saw, against the Landwehr. All right, let's do the melee result as they crash into the Landwehr. Should be good news for the cuirassiers. So the Landwehr drop a dice for being unformed, so they go down to 4. The Landwehr are at a serious disadvantage. The heavy cavalry get +2 dice, and the French get an extra dice for being 1 morale grade higher, being veterans. So let's see how the French do. Well, the Landwehr do pretty well, and the French do amazingly badly. So despite having twice as many dice, the French only draw the combat. My gosh, Charlie would be pleased with that. It's a draw. So on cavalry versus infantry, the infantry stand, and the cuirassiers return to their own lines. Good news for the Landwehr. Let's take a break at the end of turn 4. Lots of jobs to do, and we got visitors arriving. Dan, my oldest, and his girlfriend's coming around, so we'll have to pause the game at this point and come back and film a bit later. But at the end of turn 4, things are looking pretty good for the Prussians and Russians. So they have occupied and indeed pushed past the right-hand end of the French ridge with their Landwehr brigade, and that one has done well, pushing French light brigade off the ridge and withstanding the countercharge by the cuirassiers, 1 unit bouncing off, and then remarkably this 2nd battalion standing up to the charge of the cuirassiers and then indeed charging home and throwing them back. Further back from the Landwehr, the Ulhan cavalry and Landwehr cavalry are now moving up to the ridge, supported by a horse artillery and a foot artillery battery about to deploy on there. And the next unit of Prussian troops, also given infantry assault orders by Charlie last turn, are now able to potentially charge in against this portion of the French line. And we have Prussian reserves in terms of Prussian dragoons now arriving on table. In the centre, as we saw, the Russian assault is now starting to go in against this sole French gun in the centre, supported by their dragoons, and on the far right flank we have our grenadiers that we saw earlier in the turn. For the French, their dragoons are moving off to the left flank to try and push back against the Russians, and they've deployed their infantry up to the ridgeline, but they're looking very thin. Fortunately for them, we do have reserves arriving, so we have 6th Battalion of Young Guard moving forward onto the table now. Can they support and bolster this wavering French line, and indeed can the cuirassiers reform for another charge to try and throw the Prussians back on the right? Still all to play for as we reach the end of the morning in this game. All right, see you all again as we resume the game later. Cheers, everyone. Starting on turn 5, and Charlie has 1 initiative for the Russians and the Prussians. The French have got infantry assault on their battery in the centre, and they have got active cuirassiers, but a whole bunch of their infantry brigades went hesitant this turn. For the Prussians and the Russians, only 1 infantry brigade is hesitant, all other units are active. Alright, so charges first for Charlie. So Charlie's come down off this hill and charged with his Uhlhounds, supporting by his Landwehr Lancers, and the Prussian regulars have charged up against this infantry battalion. Which one do you want to do first? Do you want to do the cavalry, Charlie, or the...
Cavalry.
Okay, so the cavalry, Charlie decided to go for this. Even though the battery is still at full strength, it is low on ammo, so it'll take a negative modifier for that. So we'll do the charge. First is the defensive volley by the artillery. This will be at -2. They do get a combat dice. They get an 8, which goes down to a 6,
Fine.
which at close range will be dangerous, but not too bad. That's 2 casualties, so that's 3 casualties on the Lancers. Let's do the charge results. So Charlie gets a -2 from the artillery fire he took coming in, but he is Lancers, and he's got his general with him, so that will take the modifier to a net 0. So it'll be a straight roll off. Obviously, the Prussians have got support from their large unit of Uhlhounds. The artillery battery doesn't have support actually, because as Charlie rightly pointed out, this battalion is not from this gun battery. Although I will just check that, Charlie, because I think on the defensive that might not matter. Pretty sure this has been FAQ'd, but we don't have the FAQs to hand, so we're going for the rules as written in the rule book, and that says infantry cannot support artillery. I think under the FAQs defensively they may be able to, but we're going to play it that they can't. So let's roll. So the French and the Prussians are on a straight roll off, but the Prussians do have the benefit of a re-roll. Oh my god, the French roll a 3 and you roll a 7, so you have won by 4 without any re-rolls. Cavalry, you would melee with a LAN, and the defender would melee unformed. If you get a 1, you'll be on a 6, you'd win by 3, so it would be exactly the same, so you might as well re-roll. You get the 1, but it's the same result. You melee with a LAN, and the guns are unformed. That will not be good for them. Alright, let's move those charges. Right, now doing the firing up here, we've got a defensive volley by this French infantry battalion. They'll open fire, they get a combat dice because they're charging, a column is charging at 3 inches. We roll a 6, that's not great, and a 3. So a 6 at close range for a standard volley is simply 1 casualty against the attacking Prussians. That won't cause any morale modifiers.
So nothing happens.
So nothing happens for them, and we'll then see the charge result. Unfortunately, our artillery battery can't get any shots off against this attacking battalion because of bad positioning of the line by me.
You don't have any supports too, because they're too far away, definitely too far away.
And they're not facing in the right direction. They've got to be facing in the right direction.
Guns
can't support line, as we just checked. Alright, so let's roll the charge results. Alright, so we'll just come back with the modifier. Okay, so I think this will be the same. Both of us have attached our brigadiers. French don't, but the Prussians do have a reroll. Wow, French do better. They roll a double 6, so they probably will throw the Prussians back. You're going to use your reroll on the 3, Charlie? You might as well.
10.
A 10. Alright, so the French win by 2. The Prussians won't charge. French were lucky enough to roll a destiny test with that double 6, so they roll a 9. I think probably recover a casualty, isn't it, Charlie?
Recover a LAN, so...
Okay, so destiny test 9, dreadful looking for those. Blah, 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 blah. Recover 2 casualties, I've only got 1 anyway, or melee with a LAN. We didn't get into melee, so Charlie's taking the casualty counter off. Alright, that's it for charges. Now on to movement. Charlie's go. Movement's finished. It's pretty hectic here in the centre. So as you saw, the Lancers and all hands have moved in. The Prussian brigade here stuttered to a halt, assaulting that line. The the Prussian dragoons are now moving forward to support their light cavalry colleagues. A horse artillery is deployed on the hill in fire support, and the foot artillery battery is moving up on the flank. The Landwehr have reformed down here, all in column, although the left-hand battalion has formed square, and this one had to form up in column because it was unformed, This one went into column because it couldn't itself be charged. We're expecting to be charged by cuirassiers next turn. The French have moved their dragoons forward so they can potentially attack next turn. And the Russian left-hand brigade, from the Russians' perspective, has moved forward. All right, Charlie's just arrived with his computer, so he can play some FIFA while we're watching while he's watching his dad play the game. And we'll move on and do shooting. Charlie, you had initiative, didn't you?
Yeah.
So we'll open fire with the Prussians first. Prussian battery to fire will be the horse artillery. This will be at -2 because they did unlimber this turn, but they haven't moved as the limbers had reached the crest of the hill. They're going to fire at this unit of cuirassiers down below in the valley. This will be at effective range, and they roll a 10. That's pretty good. Let's see what that is and mark up. Right, so it's actually at long range, so that only causes 2 casualties in a discipline test, but it does take the cuirassiers up to 5 casualties, and they go unformed, no charging next turn for this particular regiment. To fire the left-hand Russian artillery battery, we will fire at long range counter battery fire against the French gunners on the hill. Pretty good roll. We roll an 8. At long range, -2 goes down to a 6, so that's half a casualty. That is another casualty, and that takes the gun up to 4 casualties. So the French, as the Russians hoped, will not be able to fire artillery assault this turn because they've now breached the casualty limit. Second Russian battery there, we think, is screened by its own guns, so they will not be able to fire. All right, that's it for all artillery fire for the Russians. We'll now do some return fire from the French. So firstly, the French battery, not doing artillery assault now, will fire at close range, probably against this battalion in the bottom of the valley. So that's a 7 at close range. Will be 2 casualties in a discipline test. We will check just to make sure that's less than 12 inches, but it does look like indeed a discipline test and 2 casualties. So let's test the casualties. They roll a 7, so they're fine. They can carry on, but 2 casualties on that. So this is going to be a tough ask for the French artillery. We only get 2 dice because we're informed.
Yeah.
And we cause 1 casualty.
3. Should have done better.
Yeah, Prussians should have done better, but they caused 3 casualties, so they've won by 2. So cavalry versus infantry.
Gun should be gone.
Losing infantry disperse. The gun goes. That'll be a falter test on the light brigade yet again. And the Lancers can take. Right down at the start of turn 6 so far, everyone has all their units active. We all went for re-rolls. The French did have to commit 2 to this faltering brigade though, so let's see what they do. They get obey orders again, so they are all right and can stay on table. All right, now let's roll for initiative. So it'd be a straight roll off, but the Prussians have the initiative.
5.
We got a 6. The French do have the initiative this turn. They get to charge. Start of turn 6, quite a lot of charges. So the French Dragoon Regiment has charged through the guns into this attacking Russian column. In the centre here, this Prussian brigade that was forestalled last turn, a different battalion has taken up the assault, and they've charged in, and he has 2 supports for his attack this turn. Down here, the cuirassiers declared a charge against the flank of the Lancers, but the Landwehr Lancers declared a counter-charge. So those 2 have gone into one another, and we'll see what the charge resolution is. So a whole bunch of charges to resolve. Charlie, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the cuirassiers or the dragoons?
Should we start here? Should we do that?
We have to do the cavalry go first because I've got initiative, and then
Okay.
your infantry will charge in. All right, let's start with the cuirassiers. All right, so it's +1 to the French. They're veterans. Both sides have attached their commanders. Let's see how we go. The French have a re-roll at -1.
I've got 9.
They roll a not very good 7. Charlie, you've rolled a 9. We will choose to re-roll a 2. That becomes a 4, so we're also on a 9, but you get a -1 from an unformed support, so it's an 8. So it's a -1 result. So that would just be a straight melee, so we will move into melee later in the turn. All right, now let's do the dragoons. My dragoons are going to charge in. We're line versus line. We're both committing our brigadiers.
Yeah.
Okay, so they will cancel one another out. And that's it. So it'll be a straight roll off. Charlie,
+2
you
because
have
I'm
flank support.
Yeah. Would I not +2 because I'm column?
And you do get +2. Yeah, yeah. So it'll be +2 to you with a reroll. So the French
10.
get an 8, you
12.
get a 10, so you're on 12. I don't suggest you take your reroll, that's -4. Cavalry versus infantry, I retire and take 1
Should we see what happens
casualty.
if I reroll?
You can see what happened to your reroll?
1.
No, not much difference. All right, we'll retire those. Defensive volley for the French here. We've only taken 1 casualty, so this will be at full effect. A 5. At most will be 1 casualty.
Don't think it's
Standard volley, a 5 is 1 casualty on the attacking Prussians.
Okay, that'll be nothing.
Okay, so that'll be no effect. And then for the combat,
I think it's just straight roll off, but I have.
a straight roll off because we're both line, but you've got 2 re-rolls, Charlie. Let's see how we do. I don't do very well. I got a 5.
11.
You've got an 11. You've won by 6. That's victory and a breakthrough, and you get a charge on and an attractive column of French infantry to plough into the flank of. All right, let's see. I think on victory I take D6 casualties and rout. So I take 4 casualties and we'll rout that. Good. As ever, when you get a breakthrough result, and unfortunately they've hit the flank of this French column, the column itself was disordered as it was within 6 inches of this French infantry battalion when it went straight backwards, so they went through it, disordered their colleagues down here. They've now been hit in the flank. So that's a flank attack and a +2 for being also hitting an unformed unit. Charlie, let's roll off. Let's see how we do here. +6 modifier. You've got your commander in as well, so actually
+7.
+7 to the Prussians. We roll a 7.
John 0. Come on.
And you roll a 4,
I'm
but
rolling,
you've got
rolling.
2 re-rolls.
Victory.
8. So it's an 8 plus a 7. That's another victory. The charge on only goes the remaining 2 inches, and that unit also has to flee. And it takes 3 casualties and is also pretty good for the Russians and the Prussians. Now the Russian 2 brigades are now all formed up at the base of the hill, ready to take the attack to the French. The French dragoons are milling at the base of the hill. 1 regiment disordered, 1 regiment still formed up, and we've got the remnants of the shattered French brigade, which was down here, and they're blocking the advance of these Young Guard battalions. Young Guard on the left is, however, moving forward to support the slightly stronger left flank of the French. On the right, we've got the cavalry combat to go on here. We were able to reform this unit. This unit stepped back and wheeled slightly, so it won't get a flank attack if the cuirassiers, or won't get hit in the flank if the cuirassiers break the Landwehr lancers. We moved another battalion into square down here to offset the threat from these French cuirassiers, who should actually be formed up. The 2 units of dragoons have moved up and are now occupying the ridge. So at the moment, it's looking pretty good for the Prussians, as I say. We've got 1 regiment beyond the ridge, a 2nd Prussian regiment firmly holding the ridge, and 2 regiments or brigades of Prussian cavalry across the ridge, and the Russians approaching, and their grenadiers on that far left flank with their dragoons moving up to assault the village. All right, we'll now do some shooting and then the melee to finish this. Skirmishing fire live, because this could have quite a bad impact on this French artillery battery. So first set of skirmishers, needless to say, while I'm doing it on cavalry, cause no casualties, and the second causes 1 more. This takes his battery up to 5 casualties. So not doing too well. Actually, it should be the French firing first, so I'll just do the rest of the skirmishers and then come back with the French firing. French skirmishers are pretty much nowhere to be seen. They've all been thrown back. We have that small unit of 3 on the hill. They'll fire at the Russians. We've got one casualty on the Russian skirmishers. We'll mark that up and then get on with the artillery fire. French guns again will fire on from this hill. They've got 5 casualties against a Prussian column below them. They only roll a 5. -1 for their casualties. That'll be a 4. At close range, that might be 1 casualty. No, only half a casualty. Let's see if it converts. It doesn't, so no effect from that French artillery fire. The rest of the French guns have either fled or been destroyed. Now over to the Russian guns. We'll do some counter battery fire. Left-hand battery first at long range. Rolls a 5. that'll be nothing. And the other one rolls a 3, that'll be another fatigue casualty. And again, shows the fertility of long-range counter-battery fire. I'll mark those fatigue casualties. At effective range, this horse artillery battery will open fire against the cuirassiers, and they roll an 8. So let's just check that range and see what those casualties are. Check it. As you probably watched on the video, it was long range last turn, and again is long range this turn, so it simply causes 1 casualty on this cuirassier unit. But they are up to 6 now, so they are pretty battered. I think that's it for all of the Prussian and Russian firing. I fired their skirmishers. Now onto the hand-to-hand combat as the Landwehr Lancers take on the cuirassiers. All this combat, so the cuirassiers do have the advantage. Their cuirasses repel the lances, and we do pretty well. We've caused 4 casualties. How many have you caused,
4.
Charlie?
Oh no, 3. I thought a 3 was a 4.
Okay, so you lose by 1. That's not necessarily a disaster. In cavalry versus cavalry, I take the ground unformed, and you fall back and retreat.
They were really bad cavalry, so.
Yeah, so we'll do those moves. Here we are at the start of turn 7, last turn before our break for the evening. So we've got a bit more space in the centre right for the French as their heavy cavalry have driven off the all hands, the Landwehr Lancers. They've retired back over the hill, but they didn't disorder anyone, and there was enough space for them to pull back. And the cuirassiers have taken that ground. We'll have some Fulter tests to do across here as a result of the regular infantry being broken by Charlie's charge by his Prussian regulars over on this side. And as we saw earlier, the pressure continues as the Russians approach the ridge. Right, let's roll for ADCs and initiative. To maintain momentum, the Prussians and Russians have declared all of their brigades active, and with rerolls, the only one that failed was the guards on the far right flank. Otherwise, everything is go for the Prussians and Russians assaults. For the French, a couple of hesitant brigades. The dragoons, unfortunately, in the centre are hesitant, and my reformed light infantry brigade down here is hesitant. And of course, I've got to do my Fulter test. So we roll a 1, we will need the reroll. A 5, again they obey orders. The French are staying in the fight today. That's 3 Fulter tests they've been successful with. But the French do have 2 hesitant brigades, so let's roll for initiative. This will be -1 on the French score. French get a 5, Allies get a 7. The Allies have initiative and charge for time. Turn 7 could again be a very dramatic turn, so the Prussian dragoons that were on this hill have charged down into the cuirassiers, supported by the 2nd Dragoon Regiment. Their Uhlans have taken the opportunity of being well positioned to charge into the flank of the recovering French brigade down here. These are the ones who just passed their Fulter test, but we've hit them in the flank unformed. The Prussian brigade on the hill has wheeled into the flank of the French artillery before it had a chance to respond. There are no French counter-charges in response. Let's see how these charges play out. This will be tough for the French, I think. First, the Prussians are going to elect to use their Uhlans against this French brigade in the centre. We don't want to see us losing this combat and us getting attacked, so we're using the benefit of having the initiative to choose the charge order we go with. So Uhlans first. This will be plus a lot as we go into the flank of those. This will be a +6 to the Uhlans. Let's see how we do. Prussians roll a 10, that goes up to 16. They destroy that French battalion and can charge on. Let's see where they choose to go. So the Lancers have chosen to wheel and charge into the flank of the Dragoon Regiment. They can wheel up to 45 degrees. The alternative was to go into this unformed unit down here, but they are faltering yet again and run the risk of being a broken brigade as one unit's being destroyed. The guns will probably be destroyed again this turn. And we would be going into the front of them, so we'd simply have a +2 bonus, whereas going into these dragoons, we have a +6 bonus, because again, the French are unformed and being hit in the flank. Okay, so we get a +6 bonus to this result, so that takes a 12 against an 8. The morale grade is, what casualties are they on? They're only on 1. The morale grade is 1 grade higher for the for the cuirassiers, but the lancers have lances. Anyway, we'll work this out. I think that's a... I'll work this out properly. Back in a second, I can't do it. Here will be a melee with Elan as the lancers charge into the flank of those dragoons. Alright, now we'll execute the flank charge against these guns with our 3 attacking Prussian foot battalions. Let's see how this will be another +6 charge result as the Prussians go in, and the Prussians get 2 rerolls. They win by 7, so they break the guns. Those guns flee, and this brigade is in serious trouble, and this Prussian infantry will also get to charge on. Just at the limit of their charge on range, they've gone into the flank of this remaining battalion in that regiment. So this is the charge on, which was 11 inches. So this would be +5 for the Prussians in this attack. They roll a 7, they'll re-roll a 1, they have 2 supports. They will re-roll the 1 again with their second support. They roll a 9. Plus 5 takes them up to a 14. They beat the French by 7. That unit is routed. It'll take 1d6 casualties and flee. It only takes 1 casualty, but it flees, that's right. With the Prussians having effectively swept the centre, they will now complete their final charge of the turn as the Prussian dragoons go into the cuirassiers. So this charge will be, as we suspected, not so good for the Prussians. This is simply +1 to the French for being veterans and heavy cavalry, but they do have 4 casualties. Both have a reroll, so the Prussians will reroll the 1 to a 10, the French will reroll the 3 to a 7, so the French go on to an 8, so the French have lost by 2, so it will be a straightforward melee. Right, we'll move those into contact, and then we'll do the shooting. Okay, so first charge will be the lancers here, going in against the flank of the dragoons. So lancers versus cavalry gives us 1 extra combat dice. Charlie, let's work this out. You start with 5 dice. Your formed lancers against cavalry, so you gain 1 for that. You gain 1 for Elan, and I lose 1 for being unformed. Neither of us. I'm a large unit actually because I'm 8 bases strong, so I gain 1 for that. So I'm on 5, and you're on how many, Charlie?
7, but I'm flanking you, so don't I get any?
Yes, you do. You get I lose 1, so I go down to 4. All right, let's see what I get. I do 2 casualties.
What? I do 2?
Okay, so that's a draw in a cavalry combat. Cavalry versus cavalry. We can fight on.
Yeah, I'm fighting.
Fight a second round or retire.
I'm fighting on.
If the opponent retires, you take the ground. If you fight on, you may reinforce units within support distance.
Or you get extra.
I get extra cavalry, that's why I moved my 2nd Dragoon Regiment to do that. So I suggest you retire here, Charlie. Charlie's being reckless, he's decided he's going to fight on. Let's see what the French do. He's going to be, well, no, not too good. Only calls 4 casualties. He's got a chance.
4.
4 casualties, it's another draw. All right, on a 2nd round of combat, maximum 2 rounds of melee for phase, attacker retires after 2 rounds of combat. Okay, so we'll mark up those casualties and you'll... We just made a mistake. I shouldn't have had my large unit bonus because I was hit in the flank, but we've played it and done the move, so we're going to leave it as it is. All right, Charlie, let's do the combat down here. Cuirassiers against the dragoons.
What'd you get?
Cuirassiers, that's a pretty impressive dice roll. Perhaps not quite so impressive as it first looked. 5 casualties. And I should have lost a dice, so I'll roll them again. Take a dice out, because I had 4 casualties. Roll them again, not nearly so good. Only 2 casualties for the cuirassiers. How many do you get? You roll them again as well, please, Charlie, so I can see them being rolled. Good stuff.
4.
You still win. You get 4. 4 against 2. The dragoons win. It's a devastating result for Charlie. I think he's done really well. He beat me by 2, which causes the cuirassiers to retreat. I thought they were going to win that one. So they have to retreat. That will take them off the table as there are no units for them to fall back behind, and their supporting cuirassiers will have to go as well. I think at that point we'll probably call the game. It looks like a resounding victory for the Russians and the Prussians. So the French still hold on to the village and the left, but apart from that their line is shattered. The Russians are now up on the ridgeline. The Prussians also hold the ridgeline. The Dragoons down there are unformed and have taken reasonably heavy casualties. We do have the 6 battalions of the Young Guard on as a reserve, but they've not come into action. We have another Falter test on the remnants of the Prussian brigade, the French brigade that were up on the hill, and these cuirassiers have now been broken by the charge of the Dragoons. Well done, Charlie. Congratulations. That looks like the end of the game. We'll come back and probably tidy all this up tomorrow. Cheers, everyone. Hope you have a good evening and enjoyed the video. Do leave us comments, and remember, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks a lot.